Dishonored: Death of the Outsider was released in September of 2017, just 10 months after Dishonored 2. It was released as a standalone game, but in reality more closely resembles a DLC or expansion. I'm opening the video with this because many people seem to want to use this particular information as a scapegoat for any criticism that Death of the Outsider receives. That expectations need to be adjusted, that it wouldn't be fair to compare it to Dishonored 2 or even the first game because it's not a full Dishonored game, it's more like an expansion. I do agree that Death of the Outsider is more expansion than full game. Even with these adjusted expectations, however, Death of the Outsider still doesn't feel like a complete experience. It has fleeting moments of greatness, and while several parts of the narrative are interesting, it ends up falling flat. Everything feels rushed or underdeveloped, and the negatives far outweigh the positives. So, what went wrong? Well, everything. The game is centered on taking out the outsider, this universe's god and devil. It takes what could be an interesting story idea and crams it into just 5 missions, the smallest amount of any game in the Dishonored series. Taking back your throne takes 9 missions, but murdering a god just half that, I guess. The characters the game focuses on, Billie Lurk, Dowd the Assassin, and the Outsider, all become caricatures of their original versions. None of them are made more interesting by what happens in this game, and in fact, all are made worse. The supernatural powers, a staple of the series, lack the upgrades and gameplay depth found in the rest of the series. The level design is mostly uninspired and more restrictive than any of the games before it, with stealth feeling like an afterthought in many situations. The chaos system is completely removed, and along with it, any real meaningful choices or consequences. This is all particularly disappointing because each installment in the Dishonored franchise up to this point has improved on something. The original game brought stealth, intricate level design, and most importantly, immersive sims back into the spotlight. The Dowd expansions told the best story and made small improvements to gameplay. Dishonored 2 told a much worse story but was counterbalanced by its incredible level design and gameplay. Death of the Outsider's most notable change is how it attempts to mainstream almost every part of its formula. It even flirts with aspects of open-world games, specifically having side quests. While secondary optional objectives aren't new to Dishonored, the format and style that they are presented here are. With a bulletin board featuring NPC targets to kill, bodies to recover, objects to steal, etc. While an interesting concept, these contracts are ultimately shallow and add little to the experience. The truth is that Death of the Outsider wasn't necessary, but it happened anyways. Due to that decision, and because it was done poorly, Death of the Outsider likely served as the kiss of death for the Dishonored franchise. The rest of this video will be an in-depth analysis of the game, specifically looking at how with changes the game could have served as a wonderful epilogue and send-off for the series. Part 1 is a summary and critique of the main narrative and levels. Part 2 of this video examines the gameplay changes made and why some are good but most are bad. And finally, there's a bit of an epilogue at the end of the video where I make a tier list of the entire series' missions just for fun. This list will, of course, be definitive, irrefutable, and objectively correct in every way. Should be a fun trip down memory lane. If you're watching this, I would wager that you have already watched my previous videos on the other games in this series, but if you haven't, then let me just say that this video is the 4th and last in a series that I've been doing focused on the Dishonored franchise. I recommend watching those other videos before this one. Now, lastly, before starting into the narrative breakdown proper, I want to touch on one final thing. Across several of those Dishonored videos I've made, I speak briefly about how Delilah is a better villain for Dowd and Billie rather than Emily and Corvo. She was introduced as their villain, and she should have stayed their villain. While she wasn't amazingly written in either the Dowd expansions or Dishonored 2, Delilah had a greater impact and presence in the former. She and her coven served as a mirror for Dowd and his band of assassins. A powerful, outsider-chosen individual, leader of an occult organization, and who used their powers for their own benefit. Dowd's story in his expansions was one of redemption and him learning to take responsibility. By stopping Delilah's plot to possess Emily Kaldwin, Dowd to some degree atones for his part in the assassination of her mother, Empress Jessamine Kaldwin. I've stated previously that in my opinion, this game, Death of the Outsider, would have been the perfect fit for Delilah's return as a villain, mirroring Dowd's return as well. It could have continued the themes explored with this set of characters, Billie Lurk, Dowd, Delilah, and the Outsider, while also strengthening the weak narrative currently present. I want to expand on this throughout the video in order to illustrate what I mean. Now, I know not everyone enjoys when non-developers make suggestions or changes to a game. It sometimes comes across like we think we know better than the developers. I can't speak for others, but for myself, that's never the point. I do it because it's part of my process for these long-form analysis videos. A critique is supposed to identify problems and then show how they could have been avoided or fixed. It's about strengthening the next product. With this in mind, let's come to an understanding here. I won't verbally stroke off the Delilah suggestions I make, and I will make every effort to keep them concise. There's just a few of them, and they're mixed in with each chapter as it was the best way to keep the video focused. Because of this decision, I will tint the video footage purple when discussing the Delilah rewrites in order to make it clear that those sections are the rewrites. If you want to skip those suggestions and just focus on the criticisms, you should be able to easily skip ahead to where the video color returns to normal. Hopefully that sounds fair. Okay, consider this now your full spoiler warning for the video.
But I could never forget the man who pulled me up from nothing. Dowd, the Knife of Dunwall. A name called out by the desperate or the dying. The assassin who ended one empress and saved another. Shame burns inside you for a long time. When I betrayed Dowd, he let me live. I left Dunwall and my own name behind. For years, I wondered if I was worth forgiving. For years, I laughed at myself for even wanting a killer's forgiveness. Sometimes mercy cuts deeper than any knife. Now I know that forgiving is something you do for yourself as much as for the people who hurt you. I know Dowd is in Karnaca, and I'm going to find him.
Death of the Outsider takes place several months after Dishonored 2, which in turn takes place 15 years after the original. Players take control of Billie Lurk, previous right hand to the assassin Dowd, and more recently left hand to Emily Kaldwin. The opening cutscene largely skips recounting the events of Billie's recent time with Empress Kaldwin from Dishonored 2 in favor of recapping what occurred in the first game's expansion. This makes sense. While Death of the Outsider is an expansion to Dishonored 2, it is actually better thought of as a sequel to the events of the first game's expansion. A sequel expansion to that expansion. In those expansions, Billie Lurk is a top lieutenant under the assassin Dowd. The expansion's villain, the witch Delilah Copperspoon, convinces Billie to betray Dowd, and she does, but eventually comes clean to him about it. Dowd spares Billie's life but exiles her from his organization and the city of Dunwall. Prior to the events of Death of the Outsider, that was the final time Dowd and Lurk interacted. This game tries to capitalize on these prior events for emotional impact, which could have worked, but the portrayal here actually just creates a weaker tone for the narrative as a whole. Dishonored 2 ended with Billie telling Emily about her involvement in the assassination of her mother. It seems natural to me that this action would be followed up with Billie wanting to make amends with Dowd for her betrayal those 15 years ago. This makes sense for the character. However, the portrayal here isn't done well. Firstly, it's presented like Billie has been hung up on getting this forgiveness for years, which is at odds with her presentation in Dishonored 2. Billie, on several occasions, stood up to and chastised Emily, the Empress, over the course of that game, particularly when she was looking for a pity parade.
It's remarkable that people tolerate the Duke.
He's got an army, control of the mines, and he's had your support from the capital. At the Duke's parties, people carve up the country while eating boiled crab.
There were parties like that in Dunwall, full of toadies sucking up to me, stabbing each other in the back.
Poor Empress. I could see those party lights from the roof of the abandoned butcher shop where I slept, in the flooded district.
Second, Billie Lurk has very little agency in her own story. Everything she does is prompted by Dowd and his own quest for vengeance against the outsider, or because she seeks his approval. In a story where supposedly Billie is trying to forgive herself, it doesn't feel like anything is actually done with that idea. It instead feels like the developers had planned for Dowd to be the main character here, but then pivoted to Billie late in development. Like they had built a narrative around Dowd going into the void and then had to stretch Billie over it instead. It's unfortunate because what comes immediately after this opening cutscene is a much more interesting narrative hook, in my opinion, than Dowd's quest for vengeance.
Every night for weeks, the same terrifying dream. A street fight, my arm dead and lying in the gutter, my eye gouged out by a Grand Guard sword. But when I wake up, they still hurt for hours. Gives me the creeps.
In Dishonored 2, Billie Lurk, then in hiding under the name Megan Foster, had lost an arm and eye after an encounter with several guards. Late in the game, there's a mission where Emily Caldwin enters the closed-off home of a man named Aramis Stilton. As part of that game's story, Emily learned of an occult seance that occurred at the home years prior, where a conspiracy group brought Delilah back from the void where Dowd had sent her. Emily, through a device given to her by the outsider, was able to not just witness that resurrection, but actually change key events in the past in order to influence the future. Among these events was the opportunity to save Aramis Stilton from losing his mind at the seance. Stopping this event from occurring had the downstream effect of Billie Lurk not losing her arm and eye, as she was originally injured while investigating what happened to Stilton after the seance. Billie continues on the rest of the game, never being aware that she originally lost these parts of herself in another timeline. Bringing this back to Death of the Outsider, this scene indicates that there's some sort of bleeding over that is occurring between these two timelines. These dreams are a reoccurring problem. The hold of Billie's ship is filled with crumpled notes about versions of these violent dreams. The travelogue entry for the first mission talks about these dreams. The developers are specifically putting attention to this plot point, the clashing of the realities that is occurring because of that choice Emily made to save Stilton. It's great. It addresses the lack of consequences that decision had in the sequel, and it circles back to the themes from that first expansion.
I've learned that our choices always matter. To someone. Somewhere. And sooner or later, in ways we can't always fathom, the consequences come back to us.
This should have been the major story narrative that ultimately brought in Dowd, the outsider, and ideally Delilah. It's Billie focused and driven by her, not Dowd. Unfortunately, this interesting notion of time distortion isn't ever really addressed or expanded upon. It's the Arby's commercial that promises something delicious, but then all you get is soggy bread and diarrhea. The first mission, titled One Last Fight, sees Lurk investigating her last lead for Dowd's location within the city, the Albarca bathhouse located near the dockyards. For some reason, Billie is sure that Dowd must be there. There are notes from her contacts that indicate Dowd is in Karnaca, but the specifics of him being at the bathhouse are largely based on flyer advertisements that she's collected. They indicate a gang calling themselves the Eyeless operates an underground boxing ring out of the bathhouse and that they supposedly use black magic in the fights there. There's a fighter called the Black Magic Brute who is thought to possibly be Dowd. That's it. The level is divided into two areas. First, the warehouse block that connects the carriage station to the bathhouse, and second, the bathhouse building itself. The warehouse area is brief, primarily serving as a means of teaching brand new players about stealth, combat, and navigation. There are 3 guards, 2 of which can be overheard discussing the impending raid on the bathhouse, which foreshadows it occurring later. Players ultimately move through the area in one of 2 ways, either by following carriage tracks into a tunnel, taking a set of stairs up and popping out near the bathhouse, or by climbing and entering the building above the tracks to make your way out onto the street in front of the baths. The house is a bit more interesting as it's the bookie's house, and so players can find documents discussing the financial benefits that the Black Magic Brute fighter has had in attracting customers for the fights. Both routes lead to the same area almost exactly, and players from there can enter the Albarca bathhouse. From the entrance, the most obvious route is forward and down into the basement where the fighting ring can be found. The area down there is quite simple and primarily for the fighters, but there's also a locker room that players can enter. This room contains one of the few routes to the upper levels. Moving along pipes and climbing through a vent allows the player to enter into a generator room above. The other routes to the upper level are through a heavily guarded door in the main arena area or through a locked door near the entrance of the bathhouse where a gang member can be bribed to unlock a door that leads to a private bar. Players do not have access to the supernatural powers yet, so it makes sense that it's a bit more restrictive here, but it still doesn't quite feel like the series' typical level design. For example, what you're seeing on screen is a door that is located in the downstairs locker room. It's locked, and I can clearly see the sliding deadbolt through the glass of the door. So naturally, I broke the glass, thinking I'd be able to unlock the door at the cost of making noise. Well, turns out no. Despite breaking the glass, and despite being able to realistically fit a hand through to unlock it, this is not an option. And that's fine, it doesn't need to be, but why even put this door here? And more importantly, it feels like this should be an option with a developer like Arcane. The upper floors are where the boss of the fighting arena is located, as well as several side rooms with equipment, bone charms, and lore documents. Several of these rooms also relate to the mission's 2 contracts, the optional side quest fluff I spoke about in the video's intro. One tasks players with stealing the recipe for a special rat-infused drink that the Eyeless gang serve and then smashing their own supply of the drink. The other asks the player to kill and burn the body of a diseased white canine located in the kennels. Neither requires much of the player, and completion of these tasks rewards coin. The actual visual design of the bathhouse is nice, the various shades of blue and white tiles throughout, the piping snaking across the walls and ceiling, along with the puddles everywhere. It creates a feeling of dampness within the environment and makes it all believable. Now, Billie Lurk came to the bathhouse looking for Dowd, and he can be found near the fighting ring, imprisoned.
You're fighting the Black Magic Brute? Why don't you roll in sardine paste and swim through hagfish waters instead? It's a less painful death.
Well, you think I can't take him? I can hold my own in the ring. I knifed bigger blighters than him when I was a Bottle Street runner. And for less coin than I'll make when I win this match.
You won't win. The brute cheats the eye with his speed. His moves are a blur. It's unnatural. Trust me, you won't land a blow.
Well, nobody's that fast.
Nice knowing you, my friend.
He's being kept under lock and key by black magic suppression devices similar to the music boxes that the Overseers use. This is a really cool concept, a powered individual being used as an attraction in a gladiator fighting ring. It just doesn't really feel fully fleshed out. To release Dowd, it's as simple as pickpocketing the key from the arena boss Jeanette Lee and using it to unlock the suppression machine's controls. Wouldn't it be cool though if to actually free him it required more effort? Maybe Billie would have to enter the fights herself and work her way through the matches to get to Dowd. It could be a if it's your first time at the fight club, you must fight type situation. Or what if she could make bets with the bookie, and if she made a big enough bet, she could get a high roller status and be taken to meet the boss. This could bring a little bit of social stealth to the situation. If the game involved Delilah and these were her followers, perhaps mentioning her name could trigger a meeting too, just something more involved to make the level feel more complex. After turning off the suppression machine, we get the long-awaited reunion between Billie and Dowd, who haven't seen each other since Billie's betrayal of her former mentor 15 years ago.
Dowd!
Lurk, I knew you'd seek me out one day. I didn't think it would be like this.
You were hard to find. How did you end up here?
So let's talk somewhere else. The Eyeless have more secrets than you know.
I've got a ship. Or what's left of it. The Dreadful Whale. It's docked below the Akantila repair station. Dowd,
Say whatever you want to say, Billie. That you're here now is enough. I need your help.
Like old times?
Those days are gone.
There are many problems created by this interaction. First, this is too easy a conversation, yet also neither of them are speaking like actual people. I knew you'd seek me out one day, and like old times? It doesn't sound like a conversation, like the characters are listening to each other and responding. Billie asks, how did you end up here? And Dowd says that they should talk somewhere else. This is reasonable, but it then never gets addressed or circled back to. It feels like it's brought up because that's obviously what fans would want to know, but then there's not a good explanation outside of because the plot needs it, and so the writers kicked the can further down the road, hoping players would forget about it. Perhaps I missed something that does follow up on this conversation, but I don't think I did. Billie feels desperate and like a lost puppy, written in a way that undoes what little character development she had in Dishonored 2. And if her contradicting portrayal is bad, then what the writers did to Dowd is a tragedy.
Who's the mark?
The one responsible for it all. The cults. The black magic. This mark on my hand. We're gonna kill the black-eyed bastard himself.
What? You want to kill the outsider? You want to kill God?
It's particularly disappointing how Dowd's return is handled, given how excellently he was written in his expansions. This game brings back debatably the most popular character in the series outside of my man Wallace, but then forgets why he is the most popular. Dowd's story was about learning responsibility, and that is completely forgotten here for a stupid revenge quest. Dowd was racked with guilt after killing the Empress and didn't understand why.
I'm here because you're right. The Empress was different. This time, you can't just fade away into the shadows. There will be consequences. Your story is close to ending, and even you can't escape it. But what ending will you make for yourself?
Through the expansions, as I've outlined, Dowd resolves this issue, and when finally confronted by Corvo after the assassination, pleads his case.
Now I want nothing but to leave this city and fade from the memory of those who reside here. I've had enough killing.
So it's surprising then to hear Dowd blaming the outsider for all of his problems, or that according to a letter written from Thomas, another assassin in their old group, apparently Dowd never stopped killing.
I've had enough killing.
I've said this before, but it just doesn't make sense how a studio who pays so much attention to the little details could make mistakes like this. Having the narrative center on Dowd attempting to kill the outsider for giving him powers flies in the face of this previous development and flies in the face of Death of the Outsider's themes, which seem to be, are there consequences for using power recklessly, as well as if there's truly redemption for your past actions. To be clear, these are excellent themes for a game about these two characters, but they don't work with the outsider as the driving force. They do work with Delilah Copperspoon, however. In the Dowd expansions, after exiling Billie Lurk, Dowd goes on to banish Delilah to the Void, believing that he has done the right thing and redeemed himself. This is what Death of the Outsider could have and should have been a continuation of, set to reinforce that all choices have consequences, even ones that seem right in the moment. By banishing her to the Void, Dowd could have unintentionally created a space for a brooding and humiliated Delilah to plot, to learn and grow from the very source of her powers. It could have been that through the years there, she comes to the conclusion that she was thinking too small with her attempt to possess Emily Kaldwin. Why settle for being merely an empress? Rather than orchestrating the coup in Dishonored 2, this would see Delilah return in order to do something bigger and more consistent with her character arc, kill the outsider and take her place as a god. Take revenge not only against Dowd and Lurk, but against the outsider himself, because his actions of pointing Dowd in her direction 15 years ago is the dark god playing favorites. From the Void, she would whisper to individuals in the real world. She begins forming her cult, the Eyeless, and this would make sense as an evolution from her small Brigmore coven. Delilah quietly grows this cult for the 15 years between Dishonored 1 and 2, using them to research how to kill the outsider. After what happened in the first game's expansions, Delilah would be paranoid about Dowd and so has her cult kidnap Dowd and hold him at the bathhouses in order to ensure that he can't interfere with her plan. You could have the outsider appear to Billie Lurk and give her a single name, Dowd. This would come full circle given that he did the same thing to Dowd all those years ago. This gives a narrative direction for Billie to seek out Dowd, to figure out why the outsider brought him up. She could rescue him, and he explains his mistake of sending Delilah into the Void, and now something isn't right. Dowd could speculate that the violent dreams and pain that Lurk is experiencing is related to this. He could reveal that he was attempting to do this without Lurk's help, but he doesn't think he can. Dowd is old now and not the assassin he used to be. The pair would ultimately need to figure out a way into the Void because of the mess they created with Delilah in the original DLCs. By banishing the witch instead of killing her, Dowd created this Delilah problem. The outsider is being hunted because Dowd put another individual into the Void with him without thinking about it. It would come full circle. Actions really do have consequences, even ones that seem good. This would leave the characters at the same place they are currently, but with better motivations, and also it better ties into the game's themes.
You want to kill the outsider? You want to kill God.
After this interaction, Dowd leaves for Lurk's ship, and players work back to the carriage they arrived on, sneaking past or dealing with a squad of guard reinforcements that have arrived. Overall, the level is quite small and short, which normally wouldn't be an issue for a first mission as it's teaching the basics of the game. However, it does end up being an issue here because Death of the Outsider only has 5 missions total, and having even one of them be a small tutorial level without supernatural powers is a waste. I in part blame this on the decision to release Death of the Outsider as a standalone game rather than an expansion. Dowd's story was released as DLC, and as such you needed the base game in order to access it. This meant that the developers could assume you understood how to play the game and could immediately start you in the action. This led to not only the best first level in the series, but just plainly one of the best levels in the series, a Captain of Industry. Death of the Outsider was released as a standalone game, which perhaps opens it up to a larger audience, but comes with the cost of having to make it friendly for that brand new person who picks it up off the shelf and who has never played a Dishonored game before. Returning now to the narrative, once back aboard Billie's ship, the Dreadful Whale, we get our first visit from the Outsider.
Let me tell you something about the void, Billie Lurk. It touches the minds of the dreaming and the dying alike. And sometimes, dreams can only tell you what you wanted to forget.
I know who you are. Why are you here? What do you want from me?
People usually want something from me.
What in the void?
But you don't want my mark, do you, Billie? So I will return something you lost.
Wait, what are you? Ah!
The world was wounded around you. And you carry the scars. You will never be the same. I wonder if you'll like them.
What did he do to me? Of course he shows up now. Shit! Shit! He took my arm! And my face! Is it because of the dreams? Or Dowd?
Similar to that first interaction between Dowd and Billie, it doesn't feel like these two are actually talking to each other. The Outsider quotes his favorite Taking Back Sunday lyrics, and Billie makes unrelated comments. I hate this version of the character. Obviously, the voice actor is different, and it's my understanding that Arcane has never outright explained why they went with a different voice actor. For reference, they don't need to either. I understand that a new voice actor can't just replicate the original voice, but it feels like the presentation and tone of the character were unnecessarily changed for the new voice actor. Seriously, compare these two versions of the character in similar moments. The Outsider visiting Dowd/Billie at the beginning of their respective expansions.
Dowd, my old friend. It's been a long while, but you've got my interest again. How the years pass and the bodies fall. Did you know that there are only 8 like you in the world, bearing my mark? I'm here because you're right. The Empress was different.
People usually want something from me.
What in the void?
But you don't want my mark, do you, Billie? So I will return something you lost.
Wait, what are you? Ah!
The world was wounded around you. And you carry the scars. You will never be the same. I wonder if you'll like them. I wonder if you'll like them.
I wonder if you'll like them. I wonder if you'll like them.
With the new version, it's like he's constantly trying to sound smart when he isn't, which I personally can relate to, but it just doesn't work. The reason the Outsider was originally interesting is because he seemed so detached and mysterious. He didn't seem like he had motivations for his interactions with Corvo and Dowd other than, I wonder what could happen. It was sort of Dr. Manhattan-esque.
All our lives, the Abbey of the Everyman tells us to hate him.
For once, they're right.
So are we working for the Abbey now?
The Outsider knows what will happen when he gives out his gifts. I don't think the black-eyed bastard cares.
The beginning of the game seems to want to present the idea that the outsider is evil, only to then at the end of the game pull the rug out from under you and go, "Nuh-uh, it was society that's the real evil." However, this doesn't work. I imagine you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who's played the series and sees the outsider as actually evil. Cold and detached? Sure. Chaotic? Absolutely, but not outright evil. It's one of the reasons the religious Abbey organization is interesting, because they often appear more evil than the god they claim to fight. So this opening narrative bit, as well as just the core motivation for this entire game, falls completely flat for me, only serving to further disconnect me from Billie and Dowd. So who is this written for? Well, again, likely a new audience. During this interaction, the outsider doesn't give Billie Lurk his mark, but does use the void to alter her. It's never outright explained what he does specifically, but through menu descriptions of both her new eye and arm, Billie is given pieces of the void. These both give her supernatural powers, as well as stabilize the pains that she's been having in her arm and eye from the changed timeline that Emily created in Dishonored 2. In regards to that last one, Billie can now also see differences from the timeline change. If this sounds interesting, I agree. It's a shame then that this just amounts to seeing posters and small environmental objects flicker black and white. If you interact with them, you get a cryptic outsider quote, and that's it. This is the Arby's soggy bread I mentioned earlier. Out in the cargo hold, Billie informs Dowd of the outsider's visit and her enhancements, but the pair quickly shift towards the mission in front of them.
I searched the Isles, tracked down a dozen crazy cults. But there's more to the Eyeless. They've got a relic, the knife that made the outsider. Thousands of years ago. It's here, in Karnaca.
A knife. So you want me to steal it?
Soon. First, we need to find out who leads the Eyeless, and where they keep that knife. They're powerful people, wealthy or noble or both. I don't know their names, but they all have an esoteric tattoo that sets them apart. Those low-ranking thugs at the boxing club talked about getting inked in the Red Camellia in the Upper Syria district.
I'll go there and see what I can find.
This lays out their goal, to find and steal a special ritual knife that can supposedly kill the outsider. The second mission, titled Follow the Ink, has Billie do exactly this. She locates the client list at the shop and then uses it to investigate two high-ranking members of the cult, as well as ultimately determine the location of the knife. The level is a sprawling neighborhood consisting of multiple streets, alleyways, rooftops, and building interiors. It serves as the real first level, given that it features a more intricate level design as well as the supernatural powers. Despite being a large area, the level can be focused onto 4 main locations: the Red Camellia Beauty Parlor, the mansion of the first target, Colibron Plaza where the second target is located, and finally a bar called the Spectre Club. Players will naturally be drawn to the first of these locations, the beauty shop, given that it's near the carriage station where the mission starts. The front door is locked, and while there is a backdoor entrance players can find, the Red Camellia seems set to specifically teach players a combo technique involving 2 of the new powers. Firstly, the power Displace, which allows for a short teleportation just as Blink and Far Reach have in previous games, but it's differentiated by allowing players to place a marker that they can then teleport back to at any time as long as they're within range. Second, the power Foresight, which acts like Bend Time and Dark Vision, but in astral projection form. It's a scouting ability. I'll discuss my full thoughts on these powers in a later chapter, but for now, the Red Camellia shows how they can be used together. The front doors are locked but are glass. Players can't place a marker through the doors, but can use Foresight to access a nearby grate to enter the shop. From there, they can actually place a teleportation marker, and then once returned to their body, can now displace through the glass door. It's a cool combo that, while interesting mechanically, ends up feeling just a bit too clunky in my opinion to be of use often. Once within the Red Camellia, players locate the tattoo room and client list in the back, which reveals the names of two high-ranking members of the cult. First is Sean Yun, a high-profile opera singer, and second is Ivan Jacoby, a city administrator who's in charge of bridges, roads, and cemeteries. The mission then splits into investigating both of these individuals for clues to the location of the sword. I like that the two targets are in separate parts of the level, as well as that you can handle them in whichever order you like. Ivan Jacoby feels like the more classic Dishonored target, so let's begin with him. The city administrator can be found in Colibran Plaza practicing a speech that he'll be giving that evening about how the city shouldn't be reusing graves. There's actually a fair bit of dialogue recorded for him just sitting there practicing, and I appreciate that Arcane took the time to record this. Ultimately, there are no clues to the sword's whereabouts here in the small plaza, but by pickpocketing a key off Jacoby, players gain access to his office where more information can be found. Once inside, Billie learns that both Jacoby and Yun have a special key in their possession that go together to unlock a high-security lockbox at the nearby Dolores Michaels bank. Jacoby's key to the lockbox can be found in his office along with incriminating evidence that can be used in the non-lethal elimination for him. See, there's actually a smaller secondary story running in the background of Death of the Outsider that attempts to provide the context for the events of the main narrative. It was actually one of the most interesting parts of the game for me. Prior to Billie Lurk's involvement with the Eyeless cult, there was a man named Cienfuegos who was a local pharmacist, painter, and member of the cult. He eventually betrays the Eyeless and sends important information of theirs to the Royal Conservatory curator Brianna Ashworth, not knowing that she's indisposed. This particular bit of information will become relevant for a later mission, but for now, know that the Eyeless didn't take kindly to this, and Ivan Jacoby was tasked with dealing with the problem. He abducts Cienfuegos and takes him to the Spectre Club, where he was used as an unwilling donor in the exclusive sanguine infusion blood transfer attraction offered there. Cienfuegos was drained of his blood and his body discarded in an alleyway. Back in Jacoby's office, a vial of Cienfuegos' blood as well as a note can be found in a hidden compartment behind a piece of wall art. Additionally, an audiograph recording of the blood transfer can be found in the upper storage room of the Spectre Club.
We'll siphon off your blood drop by drop until you die. No, don't look at the door. No one will enter here. The Spectre Club is empty. It's just us on a journey to the void. Not together, of course. You'll go now, and I'll visit later. I'll preserve a vial of blood from your last moments for a personal transfusion. A special treat.
Both pieces of evidence can be taken to an editor for the Karnaca Gazette, Christopher George, who will expose Jacoby's crimes.
Some eyeless goons tried to persuade me to stop the Cienfuegos investigation. I must be onto something big.
What investigation?
Karnaca's had a string of gruesome murders, all the blood drained from victims while they're still alive. Ivan Jacoby's involved somehow, I know it, but I need evidence. I'm offering a reward for anyone who can bring me proof of his involvement.
This ultimately leads to discovering Ivan Jacoby's death in the following mission. If players return to his office after exposing his crimes, they will find his body hanging from a lighting fixture with two eyeless gang members around it. It's meant to look like a suicide, even complete with a note next to the body, but the way the cult members are talking suggests that perhaps they killed him themselves and are staging it to look like a suicide. I like that the answer isn't clear. This is all great, and as I've said, feels like classic Dishonored. Sean Yun, on the other hand, feels quite disappointing despite a great setup. There are two ways of gaining access to Sean Yun in his home, either by learning a secret knock that him and his lover use, which tricks the maids into letting you in, or by entering the Spectre Club and using the bridge that connects the two buildings. The Spectre Club can only be entered by members of the Eyeless Gang, however, so in order to do so, Billie must first tattoo herself with an eyeless tattoo at the Red Camellia. Between these two options, I find the Spectre Club route to be more interesting. It adds a whole additional building to navigate and is more involved as it currently is. That being said, I do think the other route could have been better if it involved a more social stealth gameplay tied to the third power semblance, which allows Billie to steal the face of a target and wear it. This sounds like an excellent power, and again, I'll talk about the powers in more depth later, but it could have had some real potential here. Players can locate Sean Yun's lover earlier in the level, and it came to me that perhaps stealing her face would allow access to the building, and it sort of does, although it still requires you to know the secret knock. What you're seeing on screen is the footage of gaining access to the manor with the face, however, the moment you enter the home, you lose the disguise. There are two separate scenarios in upcoming missions that do allow you to interact with characters while disguised, so it's confusing that it's not allowed here. And I get that there's a loading screen to enter the house, and also your mana energy is drained with each step you take, but it seems like a waste to not have this be an opportunity. Okay, so Sean Yun's lockbox key is located in his bedroom safe, which is unique in that it features a voice recognition lock, meaning Billie needs both the appropriate phrase and voice of Sean Yun in order to open it. And you're likely thinking, like I did, that perhaps it's possible to use that semblance power to steal the singer's face to unlock it, and nope, that's not an option. To be clear, you can do this, but Arcane accounted for it and it doesn't work.
Where the oxrush blooms. Can't fool a machine. Only Sean Yun's voice can open this thing.
This seems like exactly the creative thinking that Arcane would have previously rewarded, but I guess not anymore. To unlock the safe, players need an audio recording of Yun performing a specific song, and that audio recording can be found in his collections room. The wrinkle is that the room's floor is electrified. This is a new addition to the series' security measures, and players will either need to navigate the room Mission Impossible style by standing atop the cases, or by locating and turning off the power system. In regards to the target himself, Sean Yun plays largely no role in his home or in the level. Whether you kill Yun or not does slightly alter the outside of his home in the next mission, however. If he was killed, then there's a memorial outside with grieving fans, and if he was knocked unconscious, then there's a note that reveals he's cancelled all of his concerts and returned to his home country of Tivia. This is all fine, even if it is minor. My issue is that I don't like that there's not a true non-lethal way of dealing with Sean Yun, though. Non-lethal routes/punishments are core to the Dishonored experience in my opinion, and the games are better for them. Sean Yun is such an unique target for the series that I feel like the developers could have gotten creative with his non-lethal, with the obvious choice being a punishment that impacts his voice or perhaps his hearing, since both are crucial to being a singer. On the top floor of his home, there's a padded room with a piano within, this presumably being where he makes his audiograph recordings. There could be an option to perhaps mess with the recording system and expose him to incredibly high decibels that would render him deaf. Or maybe it's as simple as Billie cutting out his tongue. Either would effectively end his singing career. Now, despite liking the concept behind both targets, they don't really make sense from a narrative standpoint. Why are these two in charge of keeping the knife that created and can kill the outsider safe? Specifically, why do they have the keys? In the final mission at the Shinderi Quarry, a document can be found that indicates the cult of the Outsider, who are the real organization that the Eyeless Gang is subordinate to, thought both Jacoby and Yun weren't ready to join the grown-up table. So if they aren't ready to join the real cult, then why are they being given such great responsibility? An opera singer and a city administrator both in charge of a key. What could have made this make more sense is if, firstly, these two were in separate levels, with Sean Yun being the first target. From an organization standpoint, Sean Yun could specifically have been recruited because of his popularity and that he would have access to people that could then be abducted by the Spectre Club and used in blood transfusions. Sean Yun would really just be a face for the organization. Given this, once confronted, Yun could reveal that he doesn't know much but has seen a picture of the sword in Jacoby's office, which would lead to the next mission. Ivan Jacoby could, through his city position, be a fixer for the organization, specifically in charge of disposing and getting rid of bodies. This could be served by actually flipping his position that he talks about with his speech. It would make sense for him to be in favor of regraving because he's using it as a means of hiding the bodies that the cult are using. Jacoby could then still lead to Dolores Michaels' bank as the location of the sword. These aren't a perfect solution, but are just something I thought of while writing the script. Now, finally, I want to mention just a few of the other parts of this level. There's a taxidermist shop located in an alleyway that initially seems innocent, but within the basement is a creepy dungeon.
This is sick. What is that woman doing?
You have to help me. Please, let me out.
The owner of the shop is abducting people and using them as a host for a parasitic insect species called bloodflies to nest in. This process causes the insects to produce a valuable substance called blood amber, which the taxidermist then harvests for profit. Players can release the prisoner and even deal with the bloodfly infestation by burning the nests. This is quite cool and seemed to specifically be there to tee up level differences when the players revisit this same map in the next mission. I figured that the area and alleyway would either become bloodfly infested or not, depending on your choice here. This would have been quite cool. It's disappointing to say then that nothing comes of this interaction. Whether you save the man, clear out the nest, or leave it as it is, the shop will always be infested with bloodflies in the next mission. It's disappointing because this type of cause and effect is one of the things that made Arcane special in my eyes, and it's sorely missing from Death of the Outsider. The series hasn't done a back-to-back visiting of the same map since the original game with the High Overseer Campbell and House of Pleasure missions. With those missions, there were differences and the space felt changed, such as new buildings being open, Slackjaw's men potentially being infected, and the addition of the Watchtower. While it wasn't perfect, it got the job done, and Death of the Outsider doesn't have anything like this. You might be thinking that because this game officially removed the chaos system that I wouldn't bring it up. Well, you'd be wrong. I find the lack of the chaos system is actually just Arcane chickening out. They gave up. They had an interesting and unique idea for a gameplay system with potential to be something great, but then just abandoned it. You might be thinking 3 strikes and they're out. They tried, many people didn't like it, so get over it. Well, I don't think this is fair. Imagine that I have a neat idea for an ice cream flavor. I make it and give it to some people to try. If it wasn't as successful as I would like it to be, / know that it can be, does it make sense if I just make it exactly the same and give it to the same people to see if they have a different reaction the next time? No, it doesn't. Well, that's what Arcane did. They made their flavor of ice cream, listened to no feedback, and proceeded to hand the same flavor to the same critics 2 more times, expecting different results. You might also be thinking, wait, hold up, didn't you complain about the chaos system in the first Dishonored video? And to that, you're correct, I did. But never about the concept, just the execution. I have always wanted it to evolve into something more, it just never has, nor will it, I suspect. The contracts in this level could have been used as a great way to create these changes. Doing the side missions or not would change an aspect of the revisit to this level. Unfortunately, the contracts for the level are again largely thoughtless. Finding the body of someone's brother, killing a random NPC, abducting the bartender at the Spectre Club. The one to locate the brother is the most involved as he can be found as the current blood donor for the Spectre Club. There's a bit to do here as the player can mess with the pump he and the customers are connected to in order to reverse the flow and drain the customers, but that's it. Imagine if there was a follow-up to this when coming back to the location in the next mission, or some sort of meaningful change, but there isn't. Now, finishing up the discussion for the level, once both keys have been collected, Billie pieces together that the third leader for the eyeless cult is Dolores Michaels, the owner of the bank where the knife is being kept safe. This brings us to the third mission of the game, titled The Bank Job, which is by far the best mission in Death of the Outsider, as well as just one of the better missions in the series as a whole. It's a bit of a shame because this is the only mission in Death of the Outsider that truly feels like it's an evolution from, or at least at the same quality level as Dishonored 2. I attribute this to its excellent setup and level design.
The bank is owned and managed by Dolores Michaels. I've cased the place and talked to some people, and there are a few ways inside. Others have tried and failed to rob it before.
They didn't have the focus we do. We're not after coin. How do you plan to get inside?
There are 3 possible ways. The roof, the trash disposal, and the sewers. All of them might work. Once I'm in, I need to find the vault. The knife must be in there.
You're presented a challenge: break into the Dolores Michaels bank, locate Miss Michaels herself to get her key, and then find the vault and steal the sword. There are many options to consider here in how you go about completing this objective, however. For starters, there are multiple entry points, such as the roof, the sewers, or the trash compactor. There are many security devices within the bank, authorization codes being set over loudspeakers, electrified floors, arc pylons, a wall of light, and clockwork soldiers. There's an option to drug everyone inside in order to put them to sleep, which isn't just making them unconscious, but actually asleep, meaning they can be woken up by loud sounds or if they're touched. Finally, there's the complex movable bank vault that players have to deal with as it houses the sword. It feels like a classic Arcane Studio designed level with tons of options and unexpected details. This excellent setup is counterbalanced then by some truly awful Dowd characterization at the start of the mission.
All the bitterness, hatred, and fear. And the outsider gets to choose who wields his black magic and who cowers in the dark. That's something no one should decide.
Do you really think he's to blame for all of that? For what we all did?
The outsider gave me his mark, knowing what I could do with that kind of power. For years, I carved up Dunwall from the inside until it fell apart. The world doesn't need more men like me.
I like that Billie pushes back a bit on if the outsider really is responsible, but Dowd just blows past it. He says, "The outsider gave me his mark knowing what I could do with that kind of power," and then proceeds to talk about how violent and ruthless he was with it. Yet he's ignoring what Corvo did when he was marked. This is exactly the point of the outsider giving people his mark, to see what they'll do with the power. Dowd stubbornly refusing to accept responsibility would work if he hadn't already had this crisis and subsequent realization in his own expansion. He's hardly even the same character here. Dowd is dying, which should be something that is sad for fans of the series, but instead, because of his wildly different characterization, I feel nothing towards him. Shifting back into the mission, the level is based in the same Upper Syria district from the prior mission, now at night and with a blanket of fog. It's a great atmosphere. While the bank is the main focus, you can also revisit many of the same locations from the previous mission. Shan Yun's house is inaccessible, as we've discussed. The Red Camellia hasn't changed other than an added guard. The Spectre Club hasn't changed unless you killed anyone in there during the previous mission, and in that case, it's closed down. The taxidermist shop is infested with blood flies regardless of your actions, as I mentioned. The only real change is to Calabron Plaza, where Ivan Jacoby was located in the last mission. It's now an auction site selling off the property of Cienfuegos' pharmacy. The daughter of Cienfuegos, Teresia, can be found in the level, and she gives the context that the Dolores Michaels Bank took control of the Cienfuegos estate. This fits into the background narrative I spoke of. Because Cienfuegos stole an important document from the Eyeless, Dolores Michaels, with the authority of her bank, took control of Cienfuegos' assets in order to try and locate the document. Upon learning that it wasn't there, Michaels decided to auction off all of the belongings. This is relevant as the auction is the primary location for players to gain the sleeping drug that can be placed in the ventilation system of the bank. This is actually one of the cool instances of being able to use the semblance power I spoke about earlier. If you steal the face of an attendant, you can participate in the auction yourself and buy the estate items, such as the sleeping drug.
380, going once. Aha! 400 over there. You know a bargain when you see it. 400 for this entire estate lot. Who bids 420? 400 going once, 400 going twice. Sold for 400 coins.
Good. The poppy tincture is mine.
There's even an added interaction of offering one of Cienfuegos' painting back to his daughter, to which she declines.
I got one of your father's paintings at the auction. Maybe you'd like it as a keepsake?
No, thank you. It only brings bad memories. Father's obsession with the void is what got him killed.
Now, as I mentioned, there are 3 alternate entry points for the bank, and each requires a bit of work to use. Going through the sewers mean that the player needs to acquire a maintenance wrench and then open segments of the sewer. I found this to actually be the trickiest one to figure out when playing without markers, as it wasn't immediately obvious to me how to actually use the wrench to open the sewer route. The sewer hatches in the plaza above completely went over my head. The second method is through the sanitation area, which requires finding the body of the sanitation worker who has a key to the area and then operating the trash removal controls. I like this a lot as it requires observing the environment, attempting something, and then being rewarded for it when it works. The third and final method involves finding a whale oil tank and powering the nearby painter's lift in order to reach the roof. This allows you to access the building's stairwell inside, as well as the ventilation system for the option to put everyone inside asleep. Moving into the bank itself, it's a fantastic design, and I don't have much to say about it outside of that. Maneuvering around the sleeping guards and employees if you put them to sleep was great. Making your way to the inner atrium and then finding out that the level only continued to grow more complex was great. The lockbox vaults on the bottom floor were great. I enjoyed the wink and nod to the Dishonored character Dr. Galvani, who has been a presence in each game where you can rob him. I had an audible laugh finding and reading the note between the 2 tellers discussing how paranoid Galvani was and that nothing they could say would reassure him that his possessions were safe. It was a fitting next step that he would utilize a bank like this, and it was enjoyable to be able to rob him yet again. And speaking of robbing, having multiple methods of dealing with the main vault, which we'll circle back to, was great. Dolores Michaels as the target is just okay. She is presented as the de facto leader of the eyeless individuals you've interacted with up to this point, but not really for any real reason. Michaels is said to be the most competent of the three, and a document found in her office indicates that the cult of the Outsider agreed, stating that she would soon join the cult's ranks officially. She's also described as cold and callous, but these aren't really things we see. In fact, we don't see much of Dolores Michaels at all. She's in her office having a meeting with a client, and while she certainly seems impatient, there's nothing particularly noteworthy about her. Unfortunately, similar to Sean Yun, Dolores Michaels is also missing an official non-lethal method of dealing with her. It's implied by breaking into the vault, Michaels and her bank will lose all credibility among the upper echelon of Karnaca and thus be ruined. This is a fitting punishment, but I feel like it should have actually been fleshed out. My thoughts were to tie Cienfuegos' daughter, Teresia, into it. Michaels and the bank were personally involved in the death of Cienfuegos and the foreclosure of his pharmacy. It would have been cool to forge documents as Michaels that led to a transfer of funds from several rich clients' accounts into a new Cienfuegos account, or maybe return the ownership of the pharmacy back to the daughter. This goes to that poetic justice. Michaels uses the security of the bank as a currency to get clientele, and she uses the resources of the bank to rob the poor. So robbing the bank and donating her clients' money to the poor would not only tarnish the reputation and security of the bank, but it would also create a witch hunt for Michaels from the rich. As it is, actually dealing with Michaels is optional. You'll have to maneuver around her and a client in her office in order to get her vault key, though. There's a fun interaction here if you open her secret office compartment while she's alive and conscious.
Again, those incompetents. I assure you that this is a very minor technical fault. Our technology is always maintained to the highest standard.
Here, is it? That seems very much in question right now.
Locating the final vault key also reveals that Michaels has tracked down where Cienfuegos sent the documents he stole, the Royal Conservatory. This serves as the guidance for the next mission. With Michaels' key in hand, players now must break into the advanced vault.
It's some kind of fancy elevator. A Jindosh creation, as always. A control room can move the vault into two places. The basement where they keep the safety deposit boxes, and the manager's office.
Jindosh may have been a genius, but his inventions are more fragile than they look.
From the moment you enter the inner atrium, you can see the vault hanging in the center of the room, and your goal is clear. Move the vault to a position where you can enter it and get the ritual knife. There are two methods for players to go about this objective, and each require multiple steps. The first option is to navigate to the control room, where Billie can move the vault herself. The control room is heavily guarded, requiring a verbal access code to open the security door, and then once inside, players must cross an electrified floor. Or from the inner atrium, they can displace onto small ledges near the control room and shoot the door button to unlock it, similar to what happened with the sanitation entrance. The vault can be moved to one of two locations, either up to Michaels' office or down to the basement lockbox area. Initiating the movement will trigger a security guard calling about the unscheduled movement. Players are given several options for responses, and one of them, just testing the mechanism, will always work to defuse the alert. That makes this not much of a problem, but if you don't address the call, a bank-wide alarm will be sounded. The second option for moving the vault is to find the tool that disengages the brake locks of the vault and use it to send it crashing through the floor into the sewers below.
Right. Brace yourself. I'm still in one piece, but the vault isn't.
This, as you can probably imagine, also sounds a bank-wide alarm, although it matters less because the guards are unable to access the sewer. Once moved, players use Dolores Michaels' key to open the main door of the vault, then Jacoby and Yun's keys to open the specific lockbox that contains the blade.
Dowd spared your life all those years ago, but I was taught a lesson that you still haven't learned. Some wounds stay with you, even in the void.
Give it to me. I don't have time for this.
Time repeats the same unending patterns. 4,000 years ago, this knife cut my name away. Forgotten forever. You know what it's like to lose one name and live with another. We are all made by the things that are taken from us.
I've seen the people you've twisted with your poisonous magic. You know what I want. You know I'm coming for you.
I know more than most. I know that time is bleeding into itself around you. I know that you have felt it, and you are searching for the places where the world has broken against the void. I know that Dowd is dead where you left him on a ruined ship, and you will carry that knife with you to face me at the black center of all things.
Why are you doing this? Why are you talking to me now?
I'm here because you are different.
Again, just awful characterization from both parties here. Billie states that she's seen the people that the outsider has, quote, twisted with his poisonous magic, end quote. And really? So, like Corvo, Emily, and Dowd himself, who is so twisted by the outsider's magic that he worked to save a child empress from being possessed? Or that he is so twisted by poisonous magic that he spared Billie's life after she betrayed him? This is just stupid with 2 O's. And the outsider uses so many words to say so very little. Again, that's something we have in common, him and I. What this cutscene boils down to is that the outsider is aware of Billie and Dowd's scheme to murder him, and that Dowd has died. We'll continue with that in a moment, but a final detail about this mission that I like is how it continues to build the legacy of Kirin Jindosh and his inventions. In addition to the high-security vault that operates like an elevator, Jindosh also created a complex override code for the safes within that is based on a mathematics formula. Inputting an alternate and consecutive number code that spans the 5 safes triggers an unlocking mechanism for all of them. There's no other method to unlock the safes individually, and there's no direct explanation of the mathematic formula in-game. You have to just solve it yourself. Additionally, one of these lockboxes belongs to Jindosh, and within players can find a note that indicates he has an override phrase that will stop any clockwork soldiers from attacking him. While this is cool and makes sense given the type of man Jindosh was, it's factually wrong and a retcon. The footage on screen is from Dishonored 2, where players can rewire clockwork soldiers and they will indeed attack Jindosh. Perhaps rewiring overrides the override, but at no point will Jindosh even yell the control phrase. This is a nitpick and not a big deal. It was clearly added here in this mission as a fun option for players to use, which they can. Speaking the override phrase over the bank's speaker system will turn all of the clockwork soldiers to the player's side. It's just something I'm pointing out in order to be thorough and a bit of a brat. Now, returning to the Dreadful Whale, Billie learns that the outsider was being truthful. Dowd has passed away, peacefully aboard the ship, while Lurk was infiltrating the bank. Billie will now carry on the mission that she had no personal stake in and is only doing because of misplaced guilt for what she did to Dowd 15 years ago. This is what I mean when I say that she has no agency in her own story.
I can't begin to understand his motives, but I know what Dowd wanted. And if he's got to wander the void forever, maybe I can give him some measure of peace by ending this. As the Dreadful Whale burned to cinders, did the outsider laugh or just watch? Same as me.
Lurk decides to give Dowd a Viking burial, burning her ship, the Dreadful Whale, with the old assassin's body on board. It's clearly Billie's way of saying farewell, Dowd, which is fine, I guess. Sure, why not? The ship's name is clearly a nod to the sound players have been making all game in regards to Dowd's characterization, so it makes sense that it gets destroyed along with the character.
Dowd, gone at last.
Now, armed with the knife, Billie must find an entrance into the void to kill the outsider. The previous mission revealed that the documents Cienfuegos stole contained the secret entrance to the void that the cult of the outsider use. Cienfuegos sent these documents to Brianna Ashworth at the Royal Conservatory, not being aware of the events of Dishonored 2 and Ashworth's imprisonment. The stolen documents are believed to still be in the Royal Conservatory somewhere, but the problem is that the religious militia group, the Abbey of the Everyman, has now set up base at the conservatory in order to investigate and cleanse the area after the events of Dishonored 2. This makes sense, as during the Royal Conservatory mission in Dishonored 2, we see evidence that the Overseers are suspicious of what is going on in the museum, suspecting witchcraft. And they were correct about those suspicions. Delilah's coven, led by Brianna Ashworth, were using the building as a ritual site for their black magic. Ashworth and the coven were attempting to influence the dreams and minds of the Oracular Order, an all-woman branch within the Abbey of the Everyman, in order to control the organization. They were stopped by Emily Caldwin in Dishonored 2. Probably the best thing this level, titled The Stolen Archive, does is that it gives us more Abbey of the Everyman. It takes a familiar location, the Royal Conservatory, and presents it from a new angle. From witch haven to witch hunting, it's an occult crime scene. It was enjoyable to not only see the Royal Conservatory during the day, but to be able to witness the methodical examination that the Overseers and Oracular Sisters are performing of the site. The Abbey is a horrifying and ugly organization, and likely because of that, it's always been one of my favorite parts of the world of Dishonored. Their religious fanaticism has always been interesting to me, and I've always been drawn to media that feature an organization attempting to fight the occult. It's why the dark variant of the Justice League has always been my favorite superhero team, and it's also my only explanation for why I enjoy the Hugh Jackman Van Helsing movie. The Stolen Archive mission scratches that same part of my monkey brain. It adds to my intrigue for the Abbey by specifically showing us the Oracular Order for the first time, as well as how the Abbey investigates an occult crime scene. Despite these cool details that I personally enjoyed and that I'll go into, it's also hard not to be disappointed with this mission. It's apparent that Arcane wanted an Abbey-focused mission, which is something that has been present in each game, and returning to the Royal Conservatory made sense for that. But for a game with only 5 levels, it's disappointing that one of them is a repeat from the sequel, and a tourniquet version of it at that. The original map of this area in Dishonored 2 featured a section set in the neighborhood leading up to the museum, and that is absent here without anything added in its place. The only real change seen in the level is to the museum's main room, which is now walled off with barricades. This change is good in my opinion. It transforms the space into something new organically, creating a more claustrophobic environment versus the wide open space it is in the sequel. But neither this nor the Abbey window dressing is enough for this to feel like a whole new experience. And I say this as someone who has generally advocated for more repeat levels in order to allow Arcane to demonstrate the impact of player choice, but that's not the purpose here. It feels like instead we get this level because it was convenient for both the narrative and the desired quick development time for the expansion. With that in mind, let's shift now to what we do get. The mission proper starts with Billie Lurk on the outskirts of the Royal Conservatory in a makeshift base in an abandoned building. Within we get a final voice recording from Dowd that continues with more of the same for his new personality, however it also features the one and only in-character line from him in the game as far as I'm concerned.
I could have died 100 bloody ways. But in the end, here I am. On your ship. Sipping your last good whiskey. That's not so bad. Thank you, Billy. And farewell.
This sounds like the Dowd we knew. It's quickly learned that the Abbey have ordered a quarantine for the district. Giant bonfires can be seen outside of the museum, with overseers attending to the burning of heretical documents and artifacts.
We need only record the heretical text we burned today, and our task is complete. Now, where's that ledger?
Here, on the bench. But don't worry. I already noted all of the burned books. We should see if Sister Rosewin needs a hand, though. She discovered...
There's nothing I can save from that fire. It's all ashes. I need to check that ledger and see if what I want is still here.
Players can check the ledger near one of the bonfires to learn the location of the stolen archive, but it's also clear from just listening that one of the leaders of the Oracular Order, Sister Rosewin, has confiscated it for examination after having visions in regards to it. This immediately gives direction to the level. First, it introduces one of the two Abbey antagonists that the level features. Second, it establishes that the player doesn't need to actually search for the document, but rather figure out how they will steal the document. Sister Rosewin can be found on the highest floor of the Royal Conservatory. By the time players get to her, she will have already reviewed the contents of the stolen archive and sent for her counterpart, Vice Overseer Cardoza, who is in the nearby office. It's possible to actually wait for his arrival and learn what this meeting is about.
I've concluded my study of the hidden archive, especially this silvergraph plate.
What did you learn? Was the Curator hiding secrets more dangerous than those we already burned?
It is an abomination. Darkness clings to it. We must destroy it, lest it fall into less righteous hands. Show it to no one, and burn its heretical stain from the world.
As you wish.
This is then the natural point for players to acquire the archive, by following Brother Cardoza, knocking him out, and taking the documents. You can then find and use a projector to see the contents of the archive yourself.
There shouldn't be anything on this part of the mountain. Shindere North Quarry. That's where the eyeless are getting into the void. I should keep the silvergraph plate with me.
What's cool is that because Cardoza is curious himself about what's on the archive and will find a projector to look, players can just follow the Overseer and witness the document's contents from the sidelines. Alternatively, using Semblance, players can actually steal Cardoza's face and go to the meeting with Sister Rosewin as him, getting the document handed to them. This is probably the best use of the power in the game. The stolen archive reveals the location of the void entrance on Shindere Peak, and with that information, Billie Lurk has everything she needs to kill the Outsider, and players have everything they need to finish the mission. That's it. Similar to the last mission, the stolen archive doesn't require that Billie deal with any target in order to proceed, though one of the mission's contracts does have players sort of non-lethally deal with Brother Cardoza. He needs to be knocked unconscious and then placed in one of the Abbey's interrogation machines that can be found in the basement of the building. These devices, dubbed musical chairs, can play a special musical frequency that supposedly can heal void-corrupted individuals.
Brother Cardoza says they keep dying during therapy. He says there's a heretical organ inside them that turns the healing power of music into pain. Their corrupted bodies reject the cleansing by the strictures.
Now tell me, where does it hurt when I play the music? Behind your eyes? In your stomach? Come now. You won't answer a simple question? I want to make your pain end, can't you see that? But you have to help me.
In reality, these are just torture devices, with the frequency being painful to everyone under the justification that they have some level of corruption. This non-lethal is pretty good. I like that it flips these heinous machines on the Abbey, similar to the Heretics brand with High Overseer Campbell in the first game. I also really like that to complete the contract, you are required to kill all of the other Overseers and Oracular Sisters in the level. From a realism standpoint, this works because leaving Brother Cardoza strapped into the chair while there are still overseers roaming around doesn't make sense. I also like that it moves away from the rigid morality of the non-lethals being morally good. Here, it essentially forces players to choose if giving poetic justice to one evil individual is worth killing another 40 for. I would wager most non-lethal players would say no, despite how objectively awful and creepy Vice Overseer Cardoza is.
The unembalmed body is well preserved and cool to the touch. Pressure on the chest reveals pliant skin. No contusions, no marks. Only smooth. Flawless. Why must it take death to purify the darkness from your flesh? How can I remove the stain of heresy from your body and preserve this wondrous symmetry of form? How to cut out the outsider's foul influence from inside you, leaving only grace and perfected beauty behind?
It makes for a difficult choice, which I'm always in favor of. My only other thought is that I think Sister Rosewin should have also had a non-lethal, since she is just as involved in the level. The level does feature 2 extra secondary quests. One is to find the missing partner of this woman named Courtney. It requires very little of the player, as they just enter a nearby building, find his body, and report back to Courtney. It's not interesting, so it's ignorable in my opinion. The second quest is ever so slightly more interesting in that you can decide what to do with a witch that's imprisoned in the basement awaiting interrogation by the overseers. Players can release her or not, but by doing so they get the location of a key that opens a small locked room within the conservatory. Now, one thing this level brings up that I was surprised doesn't get explored is Aramis Stilton. A note can be found in the conservatory that talks about how the Abbey is beginning to investigate Aramis Stilton and his home due to the bleeding over of the void essence coming from within. This implies he's now a target for the Abbey. Billie began the game with these horrific dreams of what happened to her in an alternate timeline, so by this same standard, Stilton should be having this as well. He was driven insane in the Ultimate Timeline, and we can witness the shifting picture at the beginning of Death of the Outsider that flashes Billie and Stilton from the 2 timelines. Dishonored 2 built up how close Billie and Stilton were, so that in combination with everything else I listed, it seems odd that there's no further follow-up on him in this game. Perhaps returning to Aramis Stilton's manor should have been the Abbey-themed level for this game, even if it was in addition to the Royal Conservatory. This would actually naturally fit with the stolen archive as well. Billie could get the document and it's just pictures of a mining camp with no directions. She could go to Aramis Stilton for his help in examining the pictures since he is a mining baron. This could support the current plot while also adding in the alternate timeline bleeding over. This also naturally brings us back to Delilah Copperspoon and how she would have fit into all of this if she was the villain here. Much of the game could have been the same up to this point, but with different context. They learn that Delilah intends to replace the outsider by killing him with the knife and then stepping into the role. The knife has been kept safe in the vault at the Dolores Michaels Bank until the ritual is ready, so Billie and Dowd steal it just as before, now intending to end Delilah's life with it. They locate the stolen archive with the Void's entrance in the Royal Conservatory and still make their way to Shendari Quarry. The Abbey investigation of the conservatory works, but the context of the occult happenings at the museum would be different due to Delilah's absence from the sequel. This is an easy and interchangeable fix in my opinion. In my Dishonored 2 video, I proposed the solution of Duke Luca Abel as well as the Crown Killer being the main villains of the game rather than Delilah. I stand by this suggestion and still think it would have led to a better narrative. Even still, replacing Delilah with any witch or occult figure would have worked as well. The narrative of Dishonored 2 didn't contain meaningful connections to the established character of Delilah. Truth be told, her character and motivations were mostly retconned for the game anyways. The Royal Conservatory mission with Ashworth, the Witch Coven, and the Oraculum device would still work without Delilah, meaning that this mission would still work. In Dishonored 2, there are several scenes where Delilah pulls Emily Kaldwin into the Void in order to tell her her tragic backstory. These weren't very good, and I think could be better utilized here with Billie in Death of the Outsider. What if Delilah was actually attempting to once again convert Lurk to her side? She could address the time distortions that Billie is experiencing and maybe even offer to rewrite history and bring Billie's lover, Deirdre, back to life if Billie agrees to kill the outsider. This would directly give Billie skin in the game and specifically to go in a different direction than what Dowd wants. It would create a rapidly approaching fork in the road for Lurk and the player to have to deal with as they begin the final level.
There's a mining complex on Shindeire Peak, somehow so obscure that most people don't believe it exists. That mad cult lives there, protecting the one place that can bring me face to face with the outsider himself. Years ago, I heard Dowd talking about the Void, a fear that grips your throat, bends your spine, but I can't turn away now. What will we have left if the outsider's gone? His name might be lost to the Void, but tonight, I'll find out if he can still bleed.
The last mission of Death of the Outsider, titled A Hole in the World, sets the player on a linear path beginning in the small Shindeire quarry town and ending in the Void itself. It's a level that is visually striking and has interesting world building, but offers little in gameplay opportunities. Let's start with the setting, as it's unique for the franchise. The quarry town is a great location with its abandoned structures and unsettling written accounts from the former workers of the mine. More objects are phasing in and out between realities, which creates a sense of movement even though it's a ghost town. Similar to the final mission in the Dowd DLC with the overgrown Brigmore estate, this level has a natural yet eerie feeling. The setting feels underutilized though, as there's not much to this level prior to entering the cult's facility. There's an encounter with wolfhounds and then a few scattered cultists around the quarry yard and rock processing rooms, but nothing else. You're moving along a linear path with no alternatives or interesting options. There was a missed opportunity here to really lean into the tension and spookiness similar to the Brigmore estate. This sense of a missed opportunity extends to the narrative as well. The Shindeire North Quarry is a location where the veil between the world and the Void is thin. There's a bleed-over effect between the two, which is what ultimately caused the mining camp to be abandoned and is also something you can personally see for yourself as you progress through the level. At some point thousands of years ago, a group of individuals discovered the connection to the Void that this specific location has, and what's further, they discovered what has since been named the Eye of the Dead God. Touching the eye breaks the veil between the world and the Void, giving the individual enhanced perceptions and the ability to see both realms. As part of the mission, Billie must do this in order to see the Void and locate its heart where the outsider is located.
It's cold. Dead. But it still sees. I can see everything. The Void. Like looking under the waves and into the sea.
This is all great, but where the level's problems develop, in my opinion, is once the game begins peeling back the layers of the Void, and more specifically, the outsider.
Thousands of years ago, we took a wretch from the streets, beaten and discarded, and blowing upon the embers we found there, we set alight the fires of divinity at the very heart of the void. We created the outsider himself, fellow seekers. A face instead of the endless dark. Black eyes rather than that malevolent emptiness that came before. A voice speaking to select few, over which otherwise would be the howling of forever. Of nothing without end. And now he sleeps in the ritual hold, held in the crushing grip of the void itself. And he will sleep forever, fellow seekers, for that is our charge. For without the outsider, the void would hunger and roil, and the world itself would shudder.
The speaker describes how the cult took a random kid from the street and by sacrificing him, turned him into the face and controlling force for the void. That without the outsider, the void would hunger and be uncontrollable. That the cult created the god. So in essence, the outsider isn't special. He's just some kid. Yes, he's technically a god, but this whole reveal largely kills what made the character mysterious. It takes everything about why the character was interesting in the first game and plasters something new over it. The outsider is originally portrayed as detached and curious, chaotic but also measured and powerful. This was more interesting in my perspective. Now he is quite literally a moody teenager. This reveal greatly weakens the character, but also the void itself. It's described as this unruly and wild force, yet a group of people were able to bend it to their will and control it? If they gave the outsider his power, which he can then pass on to others, why doesn't he kill the cultists, or give his mark to someone and send them to hunt the people down? I've seen the argument that he's a scared kid, and sure, I could see that as a reason if he hadn't already been meddling in so many other people's business up to this point. Corvo's wrongful imprisonment, Emily's coup, directly using Dowd to stop Delilah, giving Dowd and Delilah their marks in the first place, giving Granny Rags her mark in the first place. So I'm scratching the scared kid argument. I've also seen people say that this is exactly what he did over the course of the game series, and that the outsider is some mastermind working the long game with all of these characters being his chess pieces. I don't buy this either. It's retroactively creating the explanation for the developers. I feel confident about this too, given how drastically different the portrayal of the outsider and the void are between the first and second games. It's clear that the idea of the outsider being a child who was sacrificed wasn't part of the original version's identity. This is, of course, unless I missed a note somewhere that reveals the outsider has a split personality. The cult's motivations also don't really make sense. The outsider claims that they are there looking for forbidden knowledge or immortality, something some have clearly found as the Rock Sentinel envisioned, but how does the outsider play into this? The cult state that it's their responsibility to keep him sleeping in the ritual hold, so my interpretation is that just being exposed to the void is enough to give them material to study. There are tons of documents from the cult that detail their questions and conclusions about the void and the outsider, such as why he doesn't ever appear to any of them. And once in the void, you can actually see some of these studies going on. For example, there are some cultists using a camera to take pictures of an object that is shifting realities. These were all generally interesting to read or witness because they contributed to the mystique of the void. I just wish the writing had stopped short of actually providing explanations because not only were they not necessary, but they actually hurt the world building. This is why the non-lethal, despite being conceptually interesting, isn't great. While traversing the mines, players learn about a cultist named Malchiodi who was interested in the linguistics and translations of the ancient Void language. This was considered taboo research, and it ultimately led to Malchiodi's death in the Void, as well as the locking up of his room and belongings. Players can find the cultist's body in the Void, and with it, the key to his room. Following up and exploring his room leads to the mission's non-lethal.
My research into this ancient alphabet continues. Some remnants of their phonemic qualities are preserved in our oldest writings. The language possesses an unusual amount of diphthongs, reliant on distinction in tone and pitch to convey meaning. These symbols, I know the very nature of the void runs through them, but is it a dead language, or the language of the dead? Perhaps that could be the title of my next monograph.
What? The mark is the outsider's name. And this says only spirits in the void can read it.
Malchiotti's recording and journal reveal that the mark of the outsider, the tattoo that gets burned on the hands of those he chooses, is actually his name, because sure, why not? Written in a language that only those in the void, like the dead, can read. The idea, I guess, is that the outsider doesn't remember his original name, and telling him would awaken him from within the ritual hold, releasing him from the void. You can probably tell where this is going. Once in the void, Billie retraces her steps and finds her way into the ritual hold at the center of the void. It's visually great. Now, as she approaches the site, Billie runs into a familiar face.
You brought the knife. I can't hurt him. There's nothing I can do. Only you can kill him. How long have I waited here?
Too long, old man.
There he is. The outsider.
From here, players are given a choice. The first option is to do as Dowd says and kill the outsider.
This is how it ends. This is how it always ends.
I see. There are no choices left.
The second choice is a long, drawn-out conversation where Billie explains to Dowd why he shouldn't blame the outsider for his problems.
I saw the cult who hurt him. He died once at their hands. Look at him. This wasn't his choice. He never asked for this power.
Then end it. Put him out of his misery if you pity him.
Part of this conversation is convincing Dowd to whisper the outsider's name, which he eventually agrees to do. Dowd fades from the void, the outsider unthaws, and the series' classic PowerPoint slide ending makes its return. In it, the outsider either re-enters the world or he's dead. In both endings, the void goes back to being unstable, and it's noted that going forward, there won't be any rhyme or reason for who gets magic. It'll be random, and that's where the series ends. Technically, Deathloop is also in this same universe, but it feels more shoehorned in rather than intentional and thoughtful in my opinion. There's not a lot here in the ending because there's not a lot here in the game as a whole. Having fully discussed the narrative now, I want to return to and wrap up the Delilah reworks that I've been suggesting throughout the video. Again, it follows the same plot here, but now it's Delilah's cult that operate out of the mines and quarry. The library/research area makes sense given that her cult would be trying to determine how to kill the outsider. The envisioned could be sentinels that the cult created in order to help them protect the void entrance and stop any interference. Billie and Dowd would enter the void in order to stop Delilah, and the ending could be centered on two choices: what to do with Delilah, and then what to do with the outsider and/or their position. That second one I think is particularly interesting and would provide a variety of ending options that fit with both low and high chaos. In high chaos, maybe Dowd kills the outsider. As the game is right now, Dowd already regresses as a character, so this could just use that. Dowd not taking responsibility and instead blaming the outsider as the source of the problem. With the god dead, the void becomes uncontrollable without an avatar and begins leaking into the real world. Anyone and everyone could be affected by the void energy. This is more or less the ending we already get. Now, alternatively, for low chaos, you'd need to find a new vessel for the void, essentially sacrificing someone in order to keep the void calm after releasing the current outsider, or perhaps if Delilah kills him. This could even be like Fallout New Vegas, where you're almost getting courted to side with different characters, which in turn could lead to having a variety of endings. For example, who steps up to take the role as the new outsider? Maybe Dowd, or Delilah, or yourself, or no one. Maybe the real world and void could be severed completely, removing all marks and magic. There could be a boss fight against whichever person you don't choose, Delilah or Dowd. Dishonored has always shined when it pits you against other powered individuals, and it'd be cool to have two potentially different fights here based on your choice. I want to emphasize that these aren't perfectly thought through ideas, but I do think they are better than what we got. It removes the unnecessary tragic backstory of the outsider, and in particular, this narrative adds a conclusion for Dowd that doesn't just retread his prior character arc, but in a worse way. It would come full circle for him. He got the powers from the outsider, learned responsibility, and now has the chance to become the new outsider, giving up the rest he deserves in order to avoid the rupturing of the void. Dowd would understand the role because of the journey he's been through in life. Insert the Uncle Ben quote about power and responsibility. Now, I've been quite negative about this mission, which is warranted, but I want to end this narrative chapter of the video on a positive note with a few parts of this level that I enjoyed. The Eye of a Dead God is a really cool concept, a god that existed prior to the outsider. The music build-up to approaching the relic was done really well too. Connecting to this, I liked how after interacting with the eye and being granted the enhanced sight, the map becomes populated with the new envisioned enemy type. I think the moment is somewhat muddied by a decision to show one of the creatures earlier in the level, though. Had that been held closer to the vest, I think it would have been terrifying to touch the eye and afterwards see these Eldritch creatures walking around the map. They are explained to be older members of the cult who have transcended into the void, and as part of that process have taken on the stone appearance. Their design is awesome. They slowly lumber towards you and or teleport, but also have this shimmering visual animation to the stone pieces of their body that I can only describe as looking wrong or like it shouldn't exist. Reading this back, that sounds like a bug, but I promise it's not. The footage you're seeing on screen hopefully demonstrates what I'm talking about here. The envisioned end up being more bark than bite in my opinion. You can stun them using explosives or a single charged shot from your wrist bow, which will then allow you to perform an execution. Regardless, they were still a good addition. And that's it for the game's final mission and narrative overall. Next up is the gameplay and abilities.
I never knew what the black-eyed bastard wanted. Be careful. The outsider's gifts come with a price. You won't know until it's already been paid.
If you asked people what the most important part of the Dishonored series' gameplay is, I would guess that 9 times out of 10 you'd get player agency or level design as your answer. While the gameplay does have its flaws, particularly in regards to the enemy AI, the strength of Dishonored's gameplay has always been because of the successful intertwining of these two elements, player agency and level design. Being more specific within player agency, in my opinion, it's the supernatural powers and abilities in particular that matter. Despite being obtainable in any order and even completely optional to a playthrough, they determine and augment how a player can and will interact with the level design. This is one of the reasons I have a hard time getting through the no powers mode, because it's a more limiting experience. And to be clear, I mean a more limiting experience in the sense of not having the ability to fully engage with the level design, instead having to rely solely on traditional stealth and combat. Arcane often provides alternative methods through their environments, but smashing doors or pickpocketing keys don't give me the same sense of discovery as moving through a ventilation system with Shadow Walk or performing a running teleportation with Blink. Having said that, Arcane has taken small steps to improve upon the way that players can interact with the environment outside of the powers. In Death of the Outsider, there are often physical buttons that players can physically shoot in order to trigger their function from an extended range. For example, during the bank heist, players need to move the vault, and from the inner atrium they can actually peek into the vault control room from a nearby balcony and shoot the control panel buttons to move the vault. It's simple, but its interactability that itself isn't tied to the powers and gives more options on how to progress by using the weapon toolkit in unique ways. This is good. Now, having said that, I keep coming back to the powers being the most important piece of the player's agency. Arcane has always excelled at providing players with interesting levels to explore with an interesting player toolkit. That is until Death of the Outsider. If the game's level design takes a dip, then its approach to the supernatural powers feels like a nosedive. I can sum up my feelings about the powers in Death of the Outsider like this. In Dishonored 2, you were given mini powers with mini upgrades, and it encouraged the player to always be thinking about their options. You'd often come up with something outlandish, like dominoing mesmerized guards to other guards in order to extend the effect past the power's limit. Then, often, you'd be pleasantly surprised when your solution worked. This feeling that you're outsmarting the game is one of the best things about Dishonored 2 and the series. Unfortunately, Death of the Outsider is the opposite. You find things that you think should work, yet they don't. For example, using semblance to mimic Sean Yun, but not being recognized by the voice lock. The powers and how they are designed limit you and your creativity. In this way, Death of the Outsider's gameplay is a major step back from Dishonored 2. Now, before getting into the problems with the powers, I want to briefly call attention to the couple additions to the weapon and equipment side of the player's toolkit that are great, because it's important to give credit where credit is due. Greatest among these is the electric stun ammo for your wrist crossbow. Since the original game, I've always thought that the sleep dart ammo was too powerful. With the upgrade that makes them work instantly, tons of ammo sprinkled throughout levels, and then the Dishonored 2 power domino, sleep darts could often overshadow other options or undermine level exploration. Dishonored 2 attempted to curtail their overuse by limiting players to only carrying 5, although this limitation ends up not mattering as much as it could have because of the aforementioned power domino. Death of the Outsider replaces the sleep dart with the electric stun ammo, which accomplishes the same function, rendering the enemy unconscious as opposed to dead, but now the target produces noise once hit. It creates a trade-off, non-lethal takedown with the additional risk of alerting enemies. If you purchase the upgrade for the wrist crossbow that allows you to charge your shots, this ammo is even further expanded, allowing you to completely disintegrate your enemies. It's a great addition that works with as well as enhances all playstyles. Same can be said for the other great addition, which is the hook mine. Watching enemies get snagged was always entertaining, and again, it's a piece of equipment that works for all playstyles because you can toggle its lethality. Finally, Arcane Studios made some improvements to the sword combat in the game. I don't believe this was present in Dishonored 2, but I might have missed it. Guards now have several speeds of swinging their sword in order to make it harder to parry. Additionally, they can perform a fake swing to draw out your parry and then hit you afterwards. This is a small addition, but definitely helped to make the sword fights more engaging and difficult. I died more during my Terminator playthrough of this game than any of the other games in the series before it. With those few positives noted, let's circle back to where we started, the supernatural powers and why they don't work. There are technically 4 of them, but let's get Rat Whispers out of the way right away because it's hardly even an ability. To be honest, I often forget about it entirely. Rat Whispers is a less useful version of the heart from previous games. You might find it hard to believe that it could be less useful than the equipment that's only real function was to highlight runes and bone charms in the world, but I assure you it is. That basic function has been removed but not replaced with anything. It just allows Billie to talk to rats, which sounds interesting but isn't useful. The only purpose to talk to the rats is to get hints about the level, but they're often so cryptic that it doesn't mean much. Which I'm not specifically complaining about because, they're rats, they don't understand the context of what they're witnessing, but that just means it's not useful. You're better off exploring the level yourself. The other 3 powers are all good in concept, particularly because they are designed towards thoughtful and stealth playthroughs. This is exactly what I've been asking for with the series. However, their constricting and frankly confusing design limitations hinder otherwise great concepts. They also can't be upgraded through runes, only through uncovering bone charms that augment specific powers and how they operate. This means that finding key enhancements is either random, depending on the bone charm, or can only be acquired at a specific point, like purchasing it from a shop. Here's an example. The past 3 entries in the series have had a passive ability called Agility, which allows players to jump higher. Previously, you could unlock this ability with runes at any time in your playthrough. Now, because of the removal of the upgrade system, this passive ability is a bone charm that has to be found and equipped in order to have. Dishonored 2 had many bone charms that enhanced specific powers, but they were in addition to the standard rune-based upgrades. This created upgrade goals, but also on-the-fly playstyle changes with specific bone charms when they were found. It allowed players to really niche down into specific power-based playstyles if they wanted, especially with New Game Plus, which carried over the bone charm traits. We'll circle back to New Game Plus towards the end of this section. Now, let's go through the powers starting with Displace, the teleportation ability. The concept of this power naturally progresses the idea of teleportation, being able to place a marker that you can then teleport back to. With this design, it could function as both the classic teleport but also a get-out-of-jail-free card where you could place a marker somewhere and then use it when you got into a bad spot. Unfortunately, the power functions in a way where it doesn't fully work in either of these situations. For movement, it fails because of the setup of placing a marker and then needing to push the trigger again in order to teleport. This causes it to be much slower as a movement tool than Blink or Far Reach. There's a bone charm that makes it work closer to Blink by just quickly tapping the button, and while customization is good, it wasn't very useful in my opinion. With the teleportation abilities, it's almost a requirement to have time to aim before executing the movement, and so this skips over that. An alternative default mode could have been to hold and release to teleport like every other game, or you could press another button as you held the trigger to create a displace marker. In regards to the get out of jail free card function, it fails because it requires that you be within a specific range as well as that you're looking at the marker in order to teleport to it. This forces such a specific scenario for usage, so what's the point here? It doesn't offer anything functionally different than Blink or Far Reach, and it's a worse version because the default mode now takes 2 presses to teleport. Imagine if these restrictions were removed, you could place a marker somewhere safe and then start exploring. get into a pickle, and it allows you to teleport back to safety. By serving as both the movement tool and the get out of jail free card, players would have to constantly decide if it's worth it to place their marker to warp somewhere at the cost of removing their safe spot. Next we have Foresight, the scouting ability. My problem with this power is the timer with the mana system. It makes me feel like I don't get to use the power effectively. A timer makes no sense because it's rushing the player. It would be better, in my opinion, if the time was unlimited in astral mode and instead it was purely a range limit. It would make the ability more tactical, scoping out an area, but would also leave unknowns given that time is frozen and you can't see guard movements. Something else that is so goddamn frustrating is how the ability will force your astral form down when crossing certain gaps. I'll be on a balcony using Foresight, and then the moment the spirit steps off the balcony, it falls. What you're seeing on screen is an example of this. I'm trying to place a marker on the roof of the Dolores Michaels Bank, but I can't. It seems like this is a problem that Arcane didn't have the foresight to fix. And just a minor addition, I think it could have been cool if there was an enemy type, perhaps the stone envisioned, that could actually move and detect you while you were using this power. It would be a good counter while also actually being potentially scary. Now, finally, let's discuss Semblance, which is my favorite power concept out of the bunch, but I think is actually the worst. For me, it comes down to the mana limitation again, that it drains as you move. This should have been removed and the power just fully function as a Hitman-esque social stealth walking around a level power. The restrictions against using weapons or other powers could have still applied, but now it gives freedom to just walk around. As it is, the levels don't take advantage of the power. It's useful for small situations like approaching Jacoby to steal his office key, but that's it. It would have been so much more interesting if it encouraged players to be swapping faces constantly, again like Hitman with the outfits, in order to find unique interactions. With these last two powers, a part of the problem is the new mana system, recharging versus replenishing it via mana potions. I think the new system has benefits, namely that it always recharges, but it also creates restrictions. You're limited to just 3 segments of mana, 4 if you find a specific bone charm. In the previous games, your mana only partially recharged, but you could stack powers one after another, burning through mana potions to do it. It allowed for greater expression of the powers you did have at a cost. The mana system in Death of the Outsider allows for this, but only up to 3 mana bars worth of uses before requiring time to recharge. I personally like the old system better, but maybe Arcane could have offered a menu option that could be toggled for either the new or old mana system. Mana potions could be purchasable in the black market to account for the old system without the developers having to add them to the maps. Having gone through the powers, I want to now loop in the discussion of Death of the Outsider's new mode called Original Game Plus. Don't be confused by the word plus in the title, it's actually quite limiting. In this mode, the 3 new powers are removed and replaced with 3 powers from Dishonored 2, Blink for movement, Dark Vision for finding items, and Domino just because. I don't understand what the developers were thinking here. Why not allow for all of the powers in Dishonored 2, or allow for picking which 3 you want to build a playthrough around? Or allowing for the new 3 plus these original 3? It's mind-boggling because while I understand why Dark Vision was picked, as someone who doesn't use it, it's a wasted pick. The mode in total is a step back from the New Game Plus in Dishonored 2. In that game, all of your runes, weapon upgrades, masterwork upgrades, and bone charm abilities were unlocked right after the first mission. Here there aren't any runes or masterwork upgrades for your weapons, and bone charm crafting isn't unlocked until the 4th mission. And remember, there's only 5 missions. Additionally, almost all of the interesting bone charm abilities in this game are black bone charms, whose traits don't carry over for original game plus. Similar to almost everything else in this game, the whole original game plus system feels like a step back from what was present in Dishonored 2. That's the theme for this game, a step back that was unnecessary because Death of the Outsider wasn't necessary, but for some reason still exists. Unfortunately, if Death of the Outsider is the last Dishonored game we get, it leaves the series in a worse state narratively, but also mechanically. This is important to note. Death of the Outsider makes a few improvements, but by and large squanders the highs that Dishonored 2 left us on. Dishonored is one of my favorite series, and it's been such a pleasure to play through the games these past couple of years with the intention of making these videos. It's reminded me exactly why I love this series. The level design, the powers, the characters, the little details in the levels, the setting, the world building, and yes, even the chaos system. If you've watched all of the videos I've done over this series, then let me tell you how much I appreciate you and the support. In the future, I'll be covering Arcane's other major releases: Prey, Deathloop, Blade if it goes back to the studio's roots, and hopefully Dishonored 3 one day. For the time being, however, I'm going to take a break from Arcane Studios and make videos over some other games and series that I enjoy. The next video will be Uncharted 4, with The Last of Us Part 2 likely following it. Finally, as an extra, the rest of the video is my tier list ranking of the series' missions. Okay, so tier list time. Here's what we're doing. We're going through, we're going to rank all of the missions in Dishonored 1, 2, the Doubt expansions, and Death of the Outsider. I kind of want to mention, you're probably noticing it by now, with this kind of tier list, I'm not going through, I'm not really doing a whole lot to edit the audio. You guys are kind of just getting the unfiltered Caldini, right? So, you're going to hear pauses, you might hear some ums. I'm not going to talk as fast. I actually edit the audio for the videos because I talk pretty slowly. And if I didn't, the videos would be even longer than they already are, right? So just be aware, there's going to be some pauses, probably some breathing. This is kind of new to me. I've never actually recorded something like this where I do the pauses and have, like I did right there and So yeah, just so you know. So kind of like I said, we're doing this tier list. I already went through and kind of labeled the tiers, so I want to explain them to you. What I decided is that, for S, top tier, I'm actually going to limit it to just 3 levels, the top 3 levels in the entire series, in my opinion. I figured this was, kind of a good way to put a gun to my head of what levels do I think are the best. Second tier, we have Outstanding. These are just really the other amazing levels. And I guess I should say, right, especially as we go down this, pretty much all the levels here are good to outstanding, right? Compared to other games in the industry, the level design here is outstanding. Even some of the worst levels in the game, or the games, right, just outclass a lot of the levels in other series. So just want to say that. So, S is top 3, A is outstanding, B is great, C is good. With these 3, right, my goal is to really just kind of explain and differentiate, like, hey, what makes something outstanding versus great versus good. D tier is going to just be levels that are fine. F are actually the ones that I think are a bit shit. These guys, again, right, it's the Dishonored series. All of the levels are pretty good, but these are the ones that, like, when you compare them to all of the other levels in the series, they're a bit shit, right? And then the final one, which we can kind of fill in right here to begin with, I just called it Z tier, and it's the ones that aren't really real levels, right? So if I'm looking here, we got Return Home. That's where you start the first game, you talk to the Empress, you play hide and seek with Emily. I actually like it. I think it's a fun intro to the series and introduces a lot of like the world building of the series and the time period. And you see the whale ships going by, but it's not a real level, right? With that same token, we have None Like Her. I'd actually put that ahead. I think it's an exceptional intro to the Dowd expansions. You play through this whole scene right here, but from Dowd's perspective, it's quite good. Choosing Your Mark, I think, is there as well. I think that's the second Dowd expansion kind of intro. And then Memories of Training. That's just like the tutorial that I don't even know that everybody actually plays when they do Dishonored 2. But so those 4, right? Not real levels. They're all going to be here. And I guess something I should actually mention is I'm going to be trying to, with each tier, actually put them in the order. So lowest on that tier will be on the right, and it'll kind of build up, and then the one that is the leftmost will be the highest of that tier, right? So what I kind of thought about is, just kind of go through these levels and put them where I think, right? And there might be some adjusting as I put other levels, but let's just start. So, the first one we have is Dishonored. This is the opening mission in the first game. You're escaping from prison into the sewers. And while I think it sets a lot of the precedent, I don't think you don't have powers. It's pretty simple level design, which makes sense because it's the first level. I think for the time being, I'm actually going to put it in a bit shit. It's good, but when you look at the rest of this, right, it's clearly not up to the same standard, and that's okay. Let's see, High Overseer Campbell. I think I'm going to put in Outstanding. This level actually, I think, has potential to be, maybe the third place top 3 one. I really, really like this level. I think it's an exceptional first level in the series. This technically being the first level, but this one being the real one where you have powers. I think Campbell is a great target. I think the Abbey is just a great enemy. The level's really cool. You get to go through the streets, up that whole plaza. You get to the actual office of the High Overseer. I think the non-lethal's really cool. And then you have the escape. It's just overall, I think, an outstanding level. And it really sets this is what you can expect going forward. And unfortunately, I don't think all the levels that come after it reach this height. I think there's actually very few of them in the first game that reach this height. But yeah, moving on to the second one, House of Pleasure. I think this actually goes in that same category. These two are kind of the 1-2 punch of that opening game, right? And I think part of it is because they take place in the same place, same general level. And this one, you go into the Golden Cat, which I think is amazing location. The targets are also good. The Pendleton twins. I like when missions do multiple targets. Excellent level. The Royal Physician. I think I'd probably put this in C tier. It's good, right? I think Sokolov is an interesting character. He's one of the best characters in the entire series. So this is kind of his introduction. In that first video, I talk about how I think the level's just a little too linear. It's basically just a straight shot to his apartment. There's not a lot that you can kind of do different in the level. It's just kind of moving along this linear route. And I think in either the Dowd video or the first video, I actually compare it to a Captain of Industry. How the Captain of Industry actually sets up that same kind of route to begin with, where you're moving down this narrow corridor, but it makes it much more interesting. It puts guards at multiple levels. You have an arc pylon, tons of stuff there. And I mean, this level, I guess I can wait. Okay, I'm just going to put it because I just talked about it. it's also potential top 3, but right now I'm going to put it in outstanding. So I think this level is outstanding. If it's not top 3, it's probably the number 1 in the A tier. The target's fun. The whale like slaughterhouse is an awesome location. The whole like sunset outside is awesome. The non-lethal like complexity where like, hey, the non-lethal for dealing with him is a little sketchy, and like, do you blow up the slaughterhouse or not? Because like you're helping people, but it's also high chaos. And yeah, it's just outstanding level. And I know I skipped a little bit there, but let's keep going. Lady Boyle's Last Party. This is one that is probably gonna piss some people off, but I think for me it is just good. It's kind of that same thing. Like, I think the party is a cool setting. It's just very simple, and it's like once you kind of know what to do, that you can go find Lord Bixby and just like get the info about which one it is, which color it is, which name it is, for the Boyle sister. It just becomes really easy. And while I think it's really cool, the like social stealth, I think it would be cool to see if they ever did like a Dishonored 3 for them to kind of go back to this idea. And I remember actually reading that was one of the ideas they had for Dishonored 2, was going back and trying to do like another party type thing, but a more advanced version of it. And I think that'd be really cool for them to return to. Enough time has passed where like revisiting this idea wouldn't feel cheap. So if they ever do a Dishonored 3, hopefully like, set in Tivia, have some sort of like winter estate with like, a giant party going on or something. That could be quite cool. Let's see, Return to the Tower. I think this is probably A as well. I think it's gonna be number 2 right now. These might get swapped, but Return to the Tower I think is probably one of top 3 missions in the first Dishonored. Comes full circle. It just really works. It has like this whole setup with going back to get the Lord Regent finally, which is like super satisfying. It has some differences to it as well for high chaos versus low chaos. So like high chaos where the Lord Regent is actually up in his safe room up at the top, and it's much more like a militarized, tons of enemies, like state for the map, versus in low chaos he's just kind of in his bed chambers. Excellent level. Super, yeah. Probably top 3. This might actually be up there too. We'll see though. Flooded District. This, so this is actually one of the things when I made that first video, I had talked about how I think it's one of the best levels in the first game. And I think I actually said it was the best level in the first game, if I'm not mistaken. With a little bit more reflection, having kind of gone through, played through Dishonored 2, played through Death of the Outsider, a number of times, both of them. I mean, I actually replayed the original Dishonored again when making the Dishonored 2 video. I still think it's really good, particularly like that whole first section in the flooded district before you get into like the sewers. But I think I've softened on it a little bit. I think actually these 3 levels in front of it from the first game are all actually better. I still think it does a lot right, particularly the Dowd encounter. But yeah, that I think still outstanding. This one might get bumped down to great, but we'll leave it there for now. The Loyalists. I think this is a very clear, a bit shit tier. It's, a short level. I actually kind of always forget it exists. I like that it like tests your knowledge of the hub. like the hub world that you've been in the entire game. But I think it's a little short, a little basic, not that fun. Yeah. Okay, the light at the end. Okay, so this might actually be a little controversial, but I think this is a top 3 for me. And maybe not, it might get bumped down, but I think it's top 3 and deserves that spot because of what it does as the final mission being this culmination of your actions. Like how different the tone feels for this level based on if you're in low chaos or high chaos. The rainy, like stormy for high chaos with, Overseer Martin and Lord Pendleton both being like, at each other's throats. Or in low chaos where Havelock like has murdered both of them, but it's sunny out. This is the only level, in my opinion, that really commits to the chaos differences. And because I really like the chaos differences, and it's what I want more of, I think this is top 3. Okay, so Imminent Domain, second level of the Doubt expansion. Okay, we have Captain of Industry up there. Imminent Domain, I think I probably put... I think this is probably great. I think it's a good target. It's a great level. The mansion is really cool, like that the offices and everything that you have to go through. The non-lethal's cool. Yeah, good level. I actually feel like this is one that kind of gets forgotten about when compared to like a Captain of Industry and the Clockwork Mansion and all of those ones. Yeah, so I'm going to put it in great for now. The Surge, I think that goes straight to a bit shit. I think the levels like cool place. I really like the Abbey, as I've said, but I think it's a bit simple. There's not a whole lot to it. I think it's a little underserved. Stay of Execution for Lizzie. I think this will be good as well. This probably... I think actually I'm going to put that in good, and I think so far it's going to be the first one there. I actually really like, despite it being kind of the same location as Dishonored, and it's overused, I like that it's like it changes up where she's located. So it forces you to actually like go throughout the level and find her in different places. I also think it takes this location and turns it into a lot more fleshed out and more interesting, and it follows up on this level with like the guard that released you from the cell being like, potentially executed, and you can, save him or not. I like that there's like the witch that's being interrogated that was being interrogated, and you can dress up as like an overseer. Yeah, it's a cool level. And then that you also have to extract her very similarly to Sokolov, where you have to like not only find her, locate her, release her, but then also have to like extract with her out of the prison. I think that's really, a fun one. The Dead Eels. Okay. This I think is actually number 1 level for me for outstanding. This might be a contender in top 3. I'm gonna say no to these ones now. The Dead Eels. I think it's just everything a Dishonored level should be at its core. The like kind of turf war that's going on between the Hatters and then the Dead Eels, that like the whole non-lethal kind of elimination with the old hat, the geezer, sorry, not the old hat, the old geezer, is just so cool, and it's like such a great choice that, is kind of conflicted to like make. Yeah, it's complex, there's a lot to it, like going down into the sewers. It's a big level. It's across the board excellent. This might be top 3. Delilah's Masterwork. I think this would probably go... It'll for sure go in outstanding, and I think it goes about here for me. Yeah, I'm going to put it here for now. Yeah, it's a great ending to the expansion. The mansion is super cool to visit. It's very well designed. It's creepy. It's complex. I like that, you go in there and there's kind of all these like optional ways of dealing with Delilah, like, killing her, but also like knocking her out and performing the ritual for her. There's also just like tricking her into doing it after you've replaced the painting. The whole like getting into the manor is really interesting with multiple routes, and like the hell dogs that are just like the skulls are really cool, and it's like the first introduction. And like the witches teleporting at random places and kind of catching you off guard, and not quite being jump scares, but like within that same realm. Yeah, and I really value Dishonored when it's kind of creepy, and this definitely has that vibe to it, which I think works so well. So yeah, I like that. A Long Day in Dunwall. This might be fine. Our first fine. Yeah, I think it's a better first level than Dishonored. And absolutely a better first level than One Last Fight. Yeah, it's you don't have powers, which I think stops it from being a little bit higher up. But I think it does a really good job of offering complexity even without your powers. There's a lot of things to do kind of down that strip towards the docks. And like getting out of it, having to deal with Ramsey is interesting. And I like the callback that then happens in Death of the Empress, where you see him again. Yeah, I think just fine. Edge of the World, I think, is also just fine. And I think it'll be a higher rated fine. It's cool. It introduces Karnaca. It's very like contrast in tone and setting between these two cities, right? Where Dunwall's like the industrial, cloudy city versus Edge of the World. Karnaca is like this like Mediterranean sunny city. I think its big drawback, right, is it doesn't have an actual target, and it feels like it's kind of this transition to the Good Doctor. It introduces both the Howlers and the Overseers, but it doesn't really do anything with that idea. Which, I mean, Dishonored 2 in general doesn't really do much with it. But yeah, it's fine. The Good Doctor. I think the Good Doctor actually is our second B tier. And I think it's actually the first one for me. Again, similar to Delilah's masterwork, this level just really goes with the kind of leans into the creepiness, even though it's also like during the day. I think the Crown Killer's a really cool villain. Gets underutilized, but yeah, the whole like kind of insane asylum hospital is really interesting. It's creepy the first time you're going through it. Figuring out, right, and the reveal that Hypatia is the Crown Killer is cool, even though it's telegraphed. Also, the music in this level is something, and that's not really a point that I really like pick up with a lot of Dishonored. If you asked me about the music really in any of these levels, I don't know that I would be able to tell you what it sounds like, but I can tell you exactly what the Good Doctor sounds like. It's that really kind of like almost like bells, and it's like really light in the background. Yeah, it's just like it fits the setting very well. Okay, Clockwork Mansion. That is top 3 for me. And I think it's probably just number 1. No, it's not. Grand Palace is number 1. I'll tell you that right now. That'll be number 1. Yeah, Clockwork Mansion. I don't think this needs any explanation. It's amazing. The Royal Conservatory. I think this probably also goes to B tier. I think this is probably under Eminent Domain. yeah, great setting. Again, that kind of creepiness that the Good Doctor and Delilah's Masterwork has. I think it's dragged down a little bit by the non-lethal and like Brianna Ashworth just like not really being that vital to the story. Like she's vital to it, but isn't actually somebody that makes sense or that we've heard about. She's just kind of introduced and then immediately dealt with, right? Yeah, so that's kind of my thoughts. Dust District. I think the Dust District would probably be C. I think it's probably my lowest on here. Yeah, I mean, it's a good level. I like that, you know, Pedro Pascal is Paolo, and the Overseers are cool, but yeah, it just, the sandstorms are cool, but yeah, just I think compared to everything else kind of around it, it's just good. A Crack in the Slab, I think for me is probably B tier. And okay, here's the thing, right? This maybe there should be two versions of A Crack in the Slab. There should be A Crack in the Slab the first time, and then A Crack in the Slab any other time you play it. And I think A Crack in the Slab the first time would be up here, right? But I think it does actually get worse every time. Maybe not every time you play it, but after that first time, I don't think it's as fun. And I think it gets worse up to a point, and I think it's still great. Like, it's fun using the manipulating the time. But yeah, I don't think it is outstanding, right? Every single one of these levels above it, I enjoy as much the second, third, fourth time going through them as I did that first time, right? I can't say the same for Crack in the Slab. The Grand Palace, right up here, that's number one. Best level is everything Dishonored should be, except maybe minus the chaos differences. I like that, you know, there's different locations for the body double of Duke Luca Abel as well as him. It's a complex mansion. It's beautiful. It's a long level because there's that whole segment before it. Yeah, excellent level, best level in the game. And I mean the whole series. Death to the Empress, I think is good and is probably our lowest good. It's fine. It's a really cool setting. I like that it takes, again, kind of that creepiness, but I don't think it actually, again, capitalizes on it in the same way that Return to the Tower does. And it's cool as like the inverse of, you know, A Long Day in Dunwall. But yeah, it doesn't really hit the same mark for me. Okay, next one last fight. Opening mission in Dishonored, Death of the Outsider. And this goes straight to a bit shit. I talk about this one quite a bit in this video, so I mean, you've already heard my thoughts on it. It just doesn't offer a lot. It's pretty short. There's no powers. It's not complex in terms of choices or anything. Yeah, it's, I mean, pretty much the definition of a bit shit. And it might even be below the Surge for me, because the Surge at least has like complexity with figuring out how to deal with the different music box overseers. You know, the Surge actually might be ahead of the Loyalists too. I think both of these are just simple and don't really offer a whole lot. The Loyalists at least has like the tall boys and everything that you have to deal with. This is nothing. This one, yeah, isn't really good at all. This is probably, I think, the worst level. You know, the Surge actually, as I'm talking about the a bit shit category, I think the Surge is actually probably the best of the bit, you know, of the shit, right? Because it does offer complexity. It just doesn't offer much outside of that. There's, you know, no target. It's kind of a, you know, the same environment. Yeah, all of that. What do we got? Follow the Ink. This is probably good. And I think it's probably about there. Yeah, I mean, it's a big space. It's pretty complex. The targets aren't as complex as I would like, but at least Ivan Jacoby is. Yeah, there's a lot to do here, a lot of buildings to enter, all of that. Yeah, it's good. Bank job is going to go straight up to outstanding. It's the only outstanding mission, in my opinion, in Death of the Outsider. And I think this probably goes before House of Pleasure. Yeah, and I mean, I talk about this one in this video as well, right? So it's just, there's so much to it. There's a lot of complexity, a lot of options. It's a great level. Stolen Archive, I think, would belong in fine. I think I would put it above Long Day in Dunwall, because, I mean, I like the Abbey of the Everyman, but it just isn't as cool as the actual version, which is, you know, kind of benefiting from the creepy witches and everything like that. Yeah, so it's just in fine. And A Hole in the World, I think this would also be fine. It's, you know, also interesting environment. It has kind of that nature aspect that Delilah's masterwork does. The envisioned enemies are cool. The lore is kind of cool. But it suffers from the same thing the Royal Physician does, in that it's very linear. And I also just, yeah, there's, as I talk about, I don't really like the Dowd and Dowd and Outsider portion of it. And, you know, that whole beginning part, despite being really cool design, doesn't really have much to it. The actual mines don't really have much to them. Yeah, it's kind of wasted potential. Yeah. Okay, let's take a look at this and maybe do some organization. So top 3 is good. We got the Grand Palace, Clockwork Mansion, and the Light at the End. All of these, yep, I'm good here. This is great. Outstanding, we got the Dead Eels, Captain of Industry, Return to the Tower, Delilah's Masterwork, High Overseer Campbell, the Bank Job, House of Pleasure, and the Flooded District. Yeah, and I'm pretty good with that as well. And I think in that order works. For great, we have A Crack in the Slab, The Good Doctor, Eminent Domain, and the Royal Conservatory. Good. Good, we have Stay of Execution for Lizzie, Lady Boyle's Last Party, Follow the Ink, The Royal Physician, Dust District, Death to the Empress. Yep, that works. Fine. Is Edge of the World, The Stolen Archive, Long Day in Dunwall, Hole in the Wall. And then a bit shit. We have The Surge, Dishonored, The Loyalists, and One Last Fight. Yeah, I think this actually works. And here you kind of go. Here's my thoughts. If you watch this and you disagree, or, you know, want to make your opinion known, or can't believe I, you know, put A Crack in the Slab in B tier, or that I put Lady Boyle's Last Party in, you know, C tier, or that the Light at the End is a top 3 mission, feel free to comment, right? Kind of the point of this. This is just my opinion, right? Of where these levels go. And okay, I hope you enjoyed this little unexpected tier list here at the end. Take care.